Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aspertillo.ai. And with me today, I've got Helen Mackenzie. And we're going to be talking about why sales and procurement are actually twins and to how to fix the buying friction. So, Helen, before we get into it, where can people find you?
Okay, Tim. Well, I'm usually hanging around on LinkedIn, and my handle is Superstar Helen. And if you go to my bio and you scroll down a little bit, you'll find out why I'm called that.
and well worth checking Helen out on LinkedIn because she has an amazing summary title that you will have never seen anything like that before, and it's well worth just popping over to see Helen just to see that. So I really love this idea that sales and procurement are twins because I've kind of always thought that, and I've actually always loved working with procurement. I've always thought that they were a bunch of great people. So let's get through the questions. So you spent a large chunk of your career in procurement before moving into sales. What was the single biggest shock or haha moment you had when you officially sat on the seller's side of the table?
Well, obviously, Tim, I think the first thing that I sort of went aha about was that we were actually two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So we're both, trying to make connection and to finish a process. So in procurement side of things, it's run a sourcing exercise and put a contract in place, and from the sales side, it's seal the deal, as it were. So there's a sort of process where there's an end product. But the other thing is that relationships as part of that is a key thing. And I think the biggest surprise for me when I stepped into the sales side was how much time sales spend trying to get to talk to buyers, how difficult it is really to find any of them that are in the listening process, and that actually, by the time procurement in particular gets involved, because it's the business usually that's thinking about the thing they're going to buy, not procurement necessarily, a lot of the things has already happened. So I thought salespeople just need to show up when the thing was published, and there they were. Whereas that conversation and that engagement much earlier in the process, one, happens all the time with the business, but two, also is a really important part of actually winning the deal.
You argue that buyers aren't rejecting sellers, they're rejecting noise. In a world where AI can generate infinite personalized emails, how do you define the difference between a high value touch point and just sophisticated noise?
Well, when you think about it and you think about buyers, I always talk about procurement because procurement are not only getting contact from people who want to sell them something that procurement would buy, procurement technology, for instance, they're also, getting inbound and contact from everything the business that they work for buys. So when we talk about noise, who wants a phone call from somebody when you're in the middle of something, when you're just trying to get the kids to school, when you just thought you'd finished for the day? So and AI seems to be really good at this thing about interrupting people. I'm just gonna interrupt you now with an email, with a phone call. I don't know.
Just raising this to the top of your inbox.
Yeah, just floating it up there. So I don't, I think that people are, it's noise because it's unwelcome. It's unwelcome. Now, a high value touch point or a high value connection is really something that comes to you that's useful. So, that could be a conversation at a time that works for you.
Yep.
A message at a time that works for you, or somebody sharing some information that's useful to you that you didn't know before. And I think that's these are useful things that people get, and they doesn't matter how well crafted something is, if it's not the right time and it's just unwanted, then what's the point? It's noise.
I think sometimes, isn't it, is that these things are relative, aren't they? So even though someone may give us a white paper that's been written by a journalist, and someone may say to you, this is a high value touch point, actually we all know that the white paper says buy my product because we're great, and it may not actually have anything that is applicable to us. It's super beige and is there to appeal to everybody.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't matter how much you research somebody. So, you know, you might research me, you might find out where I live, you might look at the job title and the description I've got, and you might think you've got something I need. Actually, unless you know me, unless you've had a conversation with you and got a bit more of a feel for me, you might think I need it and I don't. So then in it comes, oh my goodness, it's a white paper. I that might be interesting, but what I feel then is I feel guilty that you've sent me something that you've spent a lot of time crafting, a lovely email that says, Helen, you know, this is I saw this and I thought of you and da-di-da-di-da-di-da. And you think, oh yeah, I'll read that at some point. And then you just feel guilty because you haven't read it, and it probably may or may not have been useful to you anyway. But the last thing I want to feel about you is guilt, even though you've sent me something that you think might be very useful and you've tried really hard to make it really personal. So I think that's something that nobody wants to feel is guilt, is it?
It's a really interesting point, Helen. Yeah. The myth of the level playing field is a spicy topic. If most buyers already know which suppliers they want before procurement formally begins, what does the traditional RFP process become a performance exercise, and how do we fix that?
Well, I mean, I think it's not performative, but I think that what we need to remember is that part of procurement's role is managing risk, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're a new supplier, or even if I don't have a supplier for what I'm buying, suppliers where I've got a feel for them, I perhaps had a conversation with them, or somebody I know's used them already, or I've used them myself in a previous role, you know, that taking the risk out of that is really important. So if there's a stat that's kicking about that 80% of suppliers that are invited into an RFP or that are engaged in that are people that we know already. So, you know, that's about managing risk. There's 20% that I might have done some research, I might have done a search, Google search, and I might think, oh, you know, they look okay, let's invite them as well, just to get the numbers up. So it's not performative in the sense that 80%, let's say it's four suppliers in that bucket, and the one I've found from somewhere else, you know, I'm still going to choose between them. I've still got criteria to choose between them. But actually getting into that bucket in the first place is important. So it's not performative. There's still a competitive process. There's still a way we're going to choose between the short list. But in terms of getting on that list in the first place, I think that's the more important topic, and that's where the level playing field comes in. It's not level in the sense that I mean, we once went to the market for something that I was buying, and we ended up with 125 quotes for something. Now, who wants to choose between 120 room booking systems, right? 125 room booking systems. Oh my goodness, why didn't we narrow it down? So, you know, in a sense, it's not a level playing field in the sense that we don't want every single supplier in the world that could possibly supply this for me. But on the other hand, it can be level in the sense that if I'm in the bucket of people that you know, that 80%, then compared to all the other ones, that playing field feels very level. And then it's about, you know, who's the best fit.
If trust is built long before a buying process officially starts, how can a sales team realistically engage with procurement early on without violating procurement's strict boundaries around active sourcing phases?
I mean, I'd like to myth bust around the strict boundaries. I mean, I think that potentially might apply more in government public contracts than it would do in the private sector. My view's always been, until we actually start the sourcing process, we can have conversations. And if I was, you know, I'm in sales now, and I would push back and say to people, look, there's nothing wrong with you having a conversation with me about what I'm seeing in the marketplace, about, you know, ideas around innovation, around, you know, things that I've learned, because that helps when I go to the market, make sure that my RFP, my requirement is much more fit for purpose. So I think that that's important. But when you're engaging with procurement or with people in the organization that are buying, I think that as a salesperson, we need not to be pushing at that stage. We need to be there to have that open conversation with them. Now, they may be that they're about to buy at that point, in which case on you go. They might invite you to talk more about what you've got. But I do think that helps to build that trust, is that I'm here to have a conversation with you, to tell you what I know, to hear what you've got to say, and so on. And I think that what I heard from somebody a couple of weeks ago was they're really keen to talk to people way before they want to buy. They're in a sort of IT consulting company, and that actually when the RFP comes out, they're probably not going to win because they don't know you well enough to be able to respond to that RFP and to put in a proposal that actually works for you. So finding out more about you at that stage is really important. So, and that's how you build trust. Trust is built by, not immediately saying, I've got this lovely thing I can sell to you, and please let me demo it. Let me send you a brochure. Let me get you embroiled in it. Let's just have a conversation. But that's important. And back to my 80%, you built trust, you've got the relationship, you're now into that 80% bucket, and that's that's really, really important. But I think I would be, as a salesperson, really quite confident in terms of just pushing back a little bit with a buyer. As I say, it's not necessarily procurement, it's probably somebody in the business, and just say, look, in my experience, this isn't jeopardizing anything you're doing, because you're not in a process where you're asking for quotes at this stage. We're just having a conversation. We could have bumped into each other at a conference and be having a chat. Just because it's on, in a format like this doesn't make it any more formal. We're just having a networking chat.
When I was at Oracle, we went through a process of, especially in public sector, of connecting to people on LinkedIn, because that actually allowed us to influence deals when there was actually a procurement, because we could create a piece of content and share it with our network of, especially the people that were going through that evaluation. And while we could never share a correlation between the fact that people were liking that piece of content and the fact that they bought from us, we always felt that it helped. And I should point out, we were doing that 12 years ago.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that it is important, and back to that conversations about the market, understanding what's going on, is that, let's say you're buying a car. Let's say you're buying a car and you speak to me and I tell you, about some functionality within the car that's really interesting. The way that the puncture is mended. I was hearing that you get this spray thing you put in the tire now, rather than taking the wheel off and putting a new one on, right? And so that's new. That's a new way of working. So when I'm procurement, I'm going to the marketplace and I'm specifying all the things I need in the car. I know what modern thinking is around the spare wheel and the puncture. So when I do my RFP, I'm not putting in things that are outdated or wrong. So, they're actually fit for purpose, and they're new. So getting that conversation with the buyer, making sure they understand what's working in the marketplace, possibly making sure, understanding what functionality, what things are different for you, actually helps when they go to the market, because they're saying, well, do you know what, we've got to have that bit in there because that thing's really important. So if somebody comes back without that functionality, that's not going to be fit for purpose. It puts you in a better position to win. It's about trying to frame the way that things are chosen before they even go out with the criteria to choose it. So yeah, absolutely, there's that ability to shape what the requirement is before you go out, which is only possible through conversation.
So marketing and sales are still largely judged on volume, leads, downloads, and outreach activity. If you could completely redesign how B2B sales teams are measured to get to better align with how procurement actually buys, what would those new metrics look like?
Well, I think I would be looking at not measuring activity. I don't know. I made 200 phone calls today and nobody answered. Well, good for you. you're somebody that's good at persistence, but does that actually get us to a place where somebody's going to buy from us? Not so. If I was creating a metric, I might say something around trust. How do we measure trust? Well, if I message you, Tim, and you're in my network about something, do you actually respond? So I message you on LinkedIn, or I send you an email, or I send you I phone you and I leave you a voice message.
Being connected to somebody.
Yeah, being connected. Absolutely. So I would, I'd be measuring that in terms of network, and then icing on the cake, engagement, relationship. And then I think I would be looking at, whether we were then, being invited to quote, was making a short list, or even back to that point that we've just been talking about, did we actually manage to influence the content of an RFP before a buying process started? Now, that's not as easy to measure as did I send 100 emails. But on the other hand, when we think about the objective from a sales point of view, which is turning conversations and connections into revenue for the business, that these feel like much more impactful measures to perhaps think about.
What is the single biggest assumption sales make about procurement that instantly creates friction? And conversely, what does procurement assume about sales that holds them back?
Well, unless you're selling a paperclip or something like that, I think the biggest assumption sales make about procurement is that they want the lowest price. I think that generally speaking, most procurement folk want the best business outcome, which is a little bit around commercial and price and savings, but it's also about risk as well. So back to my idea that we might get the cheapest supplier, but if in 6 weeks' time they're rubbish and we've got to change them and do another sourcing process, that's counterintuitive. So lowest price is the sales assumption. I think on procurement side of things, I think that possibly we're a little bit, when I'm sitting on that side of the chair, we're a little bit assuming that all salespeople just want to close a deal now. Perhaps some of them do, but the best salespeople that I've spoken to generally just want to have a blether, as we say in Scotland, about the problems that you're facing in the business and about how you might solve them. And I think that poor processes within sales sort of hide all that lovely value that relationships and conversations can be. And I think the other biggest assumption that procurement can make about sales is about this closing of deals, that actually the best salespeople will walk away and they won't sell you something if it's not going to work for you. They're going to actually say, do you know what, Helen, this isn't a great fit for you. I'm not going to bid because our solution's not going to work for you. Our thing's not going to work for you. And I'd rather you just didn't waste your time. I didn't waste my time selling to you something that doesn't actually work for you.
Yeah, I think it's very powerful. I think sometimes salespeople think it's negative. Actually, I think procurement people actually, there's a respect by saying, this is we're out of here.
Yeah, definitely, because you're not wasting anybody's time. Then
yeah,
I've not got to score your deal, which does your proposal, which doesn't work for us.
Yeah,
I've not got to award that contract, which 6 weeks time I wish I hadn't.
Yeah.
And we can all go away as friends and people in our network and meet again in another context, perhaps.
You've said that modern sales is less about persuasion and more about helping buyers make sense of complex decisions. Can you paint a picture of what sense-making conversation actually sounds like in a meeting?
Well, I think often when you're talking to people, you're understanding trade-offs. I think there's something when we think about what we're talking to people about. Often it's getting them to do something different or getting them to change from the incumbent to buy from you. So I think we need to understand what the pros and cons are of something, and a more relaxed salesperson, a more competent salesperson can help somebody navigate through that. They can think about risk and questions perhaps that the buyer hasn't thought to ask. I think also the internal dynamics is quite an interesting one. When we think about sales from sitting in the sales point of view, we talk about people buy from people. Well, there's an emotional outcome usually attached to that. If I'm running a procurement process on behalf of the business, I want to put in place a contract where people in the business are pleased with what I've done, they find out helpful, they're going to come to me again. So I think as a salesperson, if you can facilitate the buyer thinking about those internal dynamics, I think that is again about sense making, about navigating a process, and actually that you're in it together, that really you're sitting together as a team taking the solution through the business. If you're not going to go through a formal RFP process and you're just moving it through, that actually the sense making is really being that external ear and trying to get the buyer to stress test things, even if they're wowed by something and they really want to make it happen and they've got budget, etc. That's where I think we can be really helpful as salespeople.
There is a paradox where AI can either make us incredibly lazy, sending 10x more automated spam, or free up time to be more human. How are you seeing the most forward-thinking teams use AI to actually deepen human relationships?
Okay, well, I mean, the obvious thing for AI is about preparation and research and all that side of things before you actually talk to somebody. So, something that we might have spent an hour sort of researching, I might research you for an hour, Tim, just to see, to work out what the Chinese symbol is in your LinkedIn handle. Does that say Tim Hughes, or is it something else? Through to that, I think AI can help us with that. And for me, what I think AI also does is the whole admin process. So note taking, writing things up, helping us do all of that afterwards. And what that's releasing me to do is, during a conversation with somebody, is to actually listen, to think, to respond, to empathize. And I think that's where it makes us more human, that we're not worrying that we're making notes and getting everything down. We're not worrying that we've got to raise certain things we can be more relaxed, we can be more prepared, we can talk about things that AI has helped us find out about a person we're having a conversation with. So just empathetic communication, I think, is where it's really liberating.
How can procurement leaders shift their internal reputation from being a cost cutter or a gatekeeper to a strategic partner that both internal stakeholders and external suppliers actually want to work with?
Well, I think this is the holy grail. There's been a lot of content produced about this over the years, but I personally think that we, on the procurement side, need to be storytellers. We need to get better at telling stories, because storytelling is the human thing which helps make messages sticky. So we need to be able to tell more stories about the value we can create. So it's not just about savings is important. I think if we pretend we're not there to get the best deal and to optimize how much it costs, we're pretending we're somewhere else. But being able to tell stories, being able to bring things to life, I think for me that would help the most with the rebrand. And that then makes procurement be the person that engages earlier in a business process. So ideally, you're invited to the conversation right at the start when somebody in the business thinks they need to buy something, be it a new factory or a new desk, and then you can help shape strategy. Then you can use all the insight from the conversations with the market, with suppliers, with salespeople that you've engaged with, rather than just running an administrative process. But you need to get that storytelling out there, because it will just change the way people think about you. They'll think about the person that created the value, that delivered the outcome, not the person that was the roadblock and slowed everything down, which is what most people think procurement is.
Right, last question, Helen. If both a sales leader and a procurement leader are listening to this episode, which one habit each side should stop doing tomorrow to immediately make the buying experience better for everybody?
Okay, well, I think from a sales point of view, is please stop, treating every connection, request, acceptance as an opportunity to pitch. Every email address acquired from something as the opportunity to send 1 trillion emails to, and actually think that all of this is just about creating relationships before you actually need the opportunity. So if sales could get the head round actually patience and relationship building. I think that would be brilliant. On the procurement side, I'd say, you know, stop waiting for a sourcing exercise for the opportunity to meet suppliers. You create an hour a week where you actually talk to somebody about something that your business might want to be buying. Stop being frightened of speaking to them. It's not going to prejudice a sourcing exercise. It'll inform it. And if you spend time making those connections, then when you come to do the sourcing, you've got those relationships, you've got some great suppliers to invite into a process, and you're going to create a better outcome for the business.
Excellent. Helen, remind us again where we can find you.
Okay, so on LinkedIn, I'm Superstar Helen. I'm also Superstar Helen on Blue Sky. On X, I'm not on there very often, and I'm called Procurement Helen on TikTok. If you're there, you might see one of my windy clifftop videos on TikTok as well. But Superstar Helen on LinkedIn is the main place you'll find me, and obviously Helen Mackenzie. And go and check out my strapline. We're not gonna give it away.
No, we're not. No, they've got to
go and see it.
Yeah,
Go and see it on LinkedIn, and please
Helen,
connect with me. I'd love
Helen,
to.
thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.